The
I can't
porch
believe it.
creaked
This
beneath
changes
old
everything.
Jebediah's
Dad,
weight.
you have to share it with us.
Each Texas
Think of
dawn
all the good
was
we
a
can
new blessing for a man whose years had outnumbered the cattle that once grazed near his property. The edge of Houston sweltered, even at sunrise. Quiet suburb streets waking to life, while Jebediah's world shrank to the hum of his elderly radio and the scratch of his pen on lotto slips. The house smelled of liniment and coffee, a testament to a solitary, persistent ritual. Jebediah Clark had always loved numbers. They were simpler than people, more honest than blood, gentler than memory. Since 1971, he hadn't missed a weekly lottery. Every Saturday evening, after the last hymn at the Southside Church, and before the Sunday sadness set in, he'd watch his numbers dance across the TV screen. His neighbors called him the Lotto Prophet, half mocking, half envious, because he'd never won much, but he always played. Sometimes he'd grin and say, "One day those numbers will listen to an old black man." But behind the humor was a patience, a waiting, born from decades of being overlooked. His late wife, Mildred, had believed in miracles before cancer took her. His children, grown and scattered, remembered better their own dreams, rarely their father's. Family reunions dwindled after Mildred's funeral. First, his son Daniel stopped calling. Then, cousin Trudy moved to Atlanta chasing work. Finally, even his youngest granddaughter posted her college graduation online rather than sending a card. Jebediah forgave, but his heart took to silence. Still, every Saturday, he sat with his mug and marked his 6 chosen numbers, distillations of birthdays, anniversaries, and meanings only he remembered. The dingy kitchen lamp haloed him in gentle amber, making his skin glow against the dusk. Hushed, determined, 17, 23, 41, 2, 30. Saturday, the numbers read out loud. He smiled sideways, sipped his coffee, and began dreaming again. That mid-April evening, the grocery store hummed with disappointment. Most folks tossed their slips aside. The lucky winner would always be miles away, faceless. Jebediah tucked his ticket inside his Bible, a habit almost superstitious. And something, faint and reflexive, made him glance at the TV. The numbers, in sequence: 17, 23, 41, 2, 30, 14. Jebediah grinned. He blinked once, then twice. Then the years, the faded photo albums, the missed birthdays, the sermons so often about patience, collapsed into disbelief, absolute but slow, like a thunderstorm promising rain. He was alone. The world seemed distant, mouse quiet. But the numbers had come for him, at last. The next morning, word ran hot through the block. Old Jebediah Clark, winner of the Texas State Powerball, was the talk of every radio, every breakfast table. The local news van parked outside his porch. Strangers knocked. Reporters called. Distant relatives scoured Facebook for his address. For the first time in a generation, his phone rang until midnight. Jebediah, dressed in his only ironed shirt and went down to the lottery commission with his pastor, Mr. Ellison. The cameras flashed, and the oversized check, white background, glittering $100 million in blue font, felt weightless but heavy in his trembling hands. He remembered Mildred's laugh, her faith in luck. He wanted for a moment to cry. Family came running. First, Daniel called from a private number, voice shaking. "Dad, I saw you on TV. Can we talk?" Then Trudy messaged, then nephews from Dallas, then cousins from Alabama who hadn't sent a postcard in 20 years. They remembered every childhood story, every kindness, every loan not repaid. Social media overflowed with Clark family names, memories dug up from boxed photographs, all venerating Jebediah as our favorite uncle or our dear father. His house filled with flower arrangements and casseroles. Jebediah listened to each story, each excuse. He smiled and nodded, feeling both warmth and sorrow, remembering how easy love returned when luck chose its favorite child. But prosperity breeds suspicion. 3 days after the win, Daniel visited, his smile stretched tight over old wounds. He offered financial plans, investment brokers, prayed for wisdom. Jebediah let him speak, watching the sun set over his dry garden. Neighbors gossiped, some congratulated, others whispered. A stranger on the street asked for money for the children, bless your soul. Scam calls multiplied. Jebediah received a threatening letter, unsigned. It chilled him. "Money brings wolves," his mother used to say. That night, he locked every door, checked each window, and sat at his kitchen table, pondering justice and kindness. At the weekly Sunday service, the congregation stood and clapped. Pastor Ellison preached forgiveness and generosity. Jebediah wiped his eyes as children sang. The world, for a moment, felt new. But behind each handshake was a silent question. Every embrace a measure. How generous would he be? How much did he owe? He watched his loved ones maneuver, offerings of affection, guarded requests, and remembered all the years spent alone, his devotion to notes and numbers, in the quiet assurance of solitary hope. His heart softened. Let them come, he thought. Let them ask. Tomorrow he would decide. Tomorrow he would choose. By Monday, Jebediah's house had transformed into a hive. Family members streamed in, some familiar, others strangers carrying the scent of desperation and perfume. Laughter drifted down the hallways, mingling with old gospel records on the turntable, but it troubled the dust rather than clearing it. Cousin Trudy claimed she'd come to help Daddy sort things out, yet spent most of her time texting from the guest room. Daniel attempted to organize family meetings each afternoon, producing color-coded folders, trusts, budgets, legacy, as if a fortune could erase years of distance. Jebediah watched it all with the patience of a storm-weathered oak. His home had never been so full of voices, but underneath it wound a steady undertow: regret, need, and envy. The smallest gestures became loaded. A niece's embrace lingered, her eyes flicking to the envelope bulging from his shirt pocket. Old grudges flared quietly in the kitchen. Daniel reminding Trudy who cared for their mother at the end. Trudy countering with childhood slights and old debts. Between visits, Jebediah would sit on his porch and watch the horizon. He remembered simpler times, when neighbors exchanged pies and worries, and nobody watched his mailbox for a miracle. He ached to believe in this renewed kinship, but saw the cracks. Forced smiles, whispered negotiations, the persistent shadow of his bank balance lingering behind every polite word. Still, he found himself wanting to forgive, to share. A fortune held alone spoiled the soul. His mother taught him that. But even now, buried under assertions of family, he wondered if anyone saw the man behind the numbers. As days rolled into weeks, a new current washed into his life. The outside world knocking harder. Journalists called, asking to photograph Texas's luckiest man. Local politicians stopped by, smiling for their own publicity. Pastors, even those he hadn't met, came with brochures outlining church repairs and charities, all so dear to the Lord's heart. At night, Jebediah scrolled through emails. Old colleagues, high school friends, a preacher from Louisiana, claiming to be a cousin in Christ. The attention made him cautious. The threatening letter, "Money brings wolves," haunted him. Was it a joke? The threats grew bolder, more menacing. Calls from unlisted numbers in the restless dark offered both praise and warnings. One evening, as dusk settled in and his family bickered over inheritance in the next room, Jebediah found a dead bird on his porch. The note attached, "You can't trust anyone." He stood in his kitchen, staring at the bird. That simple and brutal punctuation. Mossy fear curled through his bones. Someone was watching. Someone wanted, desperately, what he now owned. Jebediah did not call the police. Instead, he stared at the kitchen wall for an hour, then dialed the town's oldest lawyer, Mr. Wharton, a man sharp and gentle, with grizzled hands and a good memory for pain. "It's time to make a will," Jebediah told him gently. The will was simple, but intricate. Each child to receive a portion, each cousin something specific. Jebediah wanted it clear, inevitable, beyond contestation. His only stipulation, carefully worded, was that the moment any family member contested, their portion would shrink to $1. Rest passing to the city's shelter for stray animals, the one Mildred had volunteered at every Saturday. As he sat with Horton, Jebediah chose memories to guide his generosity. To Daniel, forgiveness and a home. To Trudy, tuition for her youngest. To each cousin, enough to heal, but never spoil. The leftover millions he committed to the shelter, to feed those who ask for nothing and deserve a voice. "If any of them ask why," he said quietly, "tell them I know what it feels like to be hungry and unseen." The night he signed the will, Heavy rain battered the windows. The house felt colder, fuller. That same night, the phone rang again. This time, a muffled voice, threatening, "You don't deserve that money. Blood or not, you'll pay." Heart hammering, Jebediah sat in his rocking chair, shotgun across his lap. Fear visited, but did not linger. The next morning, he explained everything to Daniel and Trudy. The will, the gifts, the shelter, the threat. Emotions churned. First anger, then shame, then a grudging respect. Daniel bristled, but his eyes betrayed regret. It was a tense peace, fragile but real. That night, they locked doors together. Trudy peered over her shoulder. Daniel checked each bolt and window. Family for the first time in years, united against something real. Fear rather than fortune. But in the kitchen, Jebediah found the second letter, tucked beneath the sugar canister. This one was simpler, more chilling. "If the money leaves this family, you die." He read it once, calm, then burned it in his old skillet. Jebediah told no one. Instead, he returned to the numbers. Saturday came, as always. Not a holy day, but one set apart by hope. He played the lottery, again, out of habit, marking new numbers. 6, 13, 44, 8, 21, 11. A silent prayer for guidance, for justice. Before dawn, he sat at his kitchen table, quietly breathing in the scent of rain-soaked earth, pondering the storm to come. If fortune chose you once, he thought, it must test you after. The days after that second letter grew taut and strange. Jebediah moved through his house like a careful animal. Doors double-checked, windows peered through before stepping outside. Jebediah moved through his house like a careful animal. He watched his family too, not with suspicion, but with a trembling hope that the world had not warped their hearts past returning. Daniel's nerves frayed quick. Where once he pressed for planning meetings, now he snapped at Trudy, leaping to anger when her son played too loud or a cousin laughed too free. It was Daniel, awake with worry, who first saw the car parked 2 houses down every evening. Always the same battered sedan, windows fogged. When he tried to approach, the threat no longer felt like paper and ink. It pressed, invisible against their windows. Jebediah endured each sunrise, wondering how much of this was the money and how much just the truth of people, their needs laid raw once fortune struck. His reflections haunted him. He found himself remembering particular things. How, the summer before Mildred died, he'd sold his old Ford to keep Daniel's plumbing business afloat. How his only thanks had been 3 years of silence afterward, broken only by a birthday text. He remembered lending Trudy money for tuition, and the letter she'd sent, full of gratitude, now somehow more real than any of her sudden smiles these days. Through it all, Jebediah's will held steady. The shelter for strays, Mildred's cause, became his own. In the secrecy of his living room, he phoned them, promising the donation in full. He didn't mention the threats. He offered to visit, but declined to set a date. Just a tired old man giving back, he told the director. He listened to her gratitude, humble and true, and something in him settled, like a stone fitted gently into the earth. But the money became a weight, even as he arranged its dispersal. Word spread beyond family. 2 cousins bickered in his kitchen over shares, insisting on fairness, but meaning only their own. The family's warmth soured, each phrase edged with need. Jebediah hardly recognized the house. Children's laughter replaced by late-night conference calls. Recipes shared only in whispers. Every night, Daniel insisted the locks were checked. Every morning, Trudy peeked through blinds. Even the church seemed changed, prayer requests now accompanied by hopeful glances. Then, on a Monday deep in May, the window by the kitchen splintered around midnight. Jebediah woke to the dull thud, heart a bass drum in darkness. Daniel stumbled from his room, baseball bat raised. Trudy dialed 911, voice urgent but trembling. Someone was inside. They huddled in the hallway, frightened by the escalation, by the reality that the storm had arrived. The intruder moved quietly, as if knowing the house, as if, Jebediah realized with sudden, cold clarity, as if he belonged. The voice from the kitchen. "Don't be stupid, Uncle. It's not just yours." A cousin, drunk, broken by losses, desperate, tormented by rumors of even larger winnings, still hidden. He brought a gun. His tears were louder than his demands. Jebediah, calm somehow, stepped into view. "Only thing I have left can't be spent," Jebediah said, palms raised. "If you need, I'll give." But the cousin could not hear him. Police lights slashed the night. Tires on curb. Shouts cracking through shadows. "I just needed a chance," he sobbed. And Jebediah watched as officers led him away, neither angered nor vindicated, only old, so very old. He pressed his hand to the porch rail, steadied himself, and wept. For his cousin, for the family, for all the things money could never reach. That night, Daniel and Trudy slept in the same room as children might, Daniel's hand resting on his sister's shoulder. Some warmth returned in despair. Morning crept in silver and cool. Days passed, softer, quieter. Police installed an alarm. Daniel, strangely subdued, began talking to Jebediah in the mornings. Trudy abandoned her phone for a week. Cousins stopped calling, each perhaps now a little ashamed. The news of the attempted break-in leaked, and the neighbors went from smiles to wary pity. "See what riches bring," one old friend muttered at the gas station. Jebediah's heart grew tired, but lighter. Something had been spent in the night's ordeal. With lawyers, he prepared the wire transfers to each relative, keeping nothing back. When asked, he gave each a blessing, not a justification. At the church, he donated a modest sum for repairs. But at the shelter, he signed the full check in Mildred's name, specifying the fund was for the voiceless, the hungry, the gentle forgotten. The clerk at the shelter, a young woman with braids and a gentle accent, looked at him with real gratitude. "You saved us for years," she whispered. And Jebediah felt the kind of peace numbers and fortune could never buy. He spent an hour watching the dogs tumble in the yard, remembering childhood afternoons before life demanded so much of everyone. One last call came from Daniel. "Dad, why'd you do it? Why not keep something for yourself?" Jebediah heard the ache underneath, not just for riches lost, but for time, for family. "I was alone a long time, son. Money didn't bring company. It couldn't buy a single birthday call. It's not about owing. It's about letting go, about finding out what's left when nothing's held back." Daniel cried, quietly, in a way Jebediah had not heard since he was a small, lost boy. As summer healed the garden, the house quieted. Cousins drifted back to their own lives, the phone silent, but not unfriendly. Trudy hugged him fully, not asking for anything, her tears soaking his shoulder. Daniel visited each Sunday, sometimes alone, sometimes with his little girl, who brought dandelions and shy smiles. Through hardship, through fear, through the sharpening of fortune's blade, something had survived. The bruised, stubborn roots of family, reaching, perhaps, for rain. Summer ripened and softened the edges of things. The grass, once brittle and sun-bleached, crept green again along the streets of the neighborhood. Children biked past Jebediah's fence, waving, their parents offering cautious nods. Beneath the shifting branches of his elder oak, Jebediah sat most afternoons with a battered notebook open on his knees and a pencil moving in slow, looping cursive. Sometimes he wrote prayers, sometimes names. Inside, the house breathed with a quieter rhythm. The distant cousins had dispersed after the incident, shame and fractured pride pushing them back to their own corners of the world. Trudy went home to her children, Daniel to his plumbing work. Though he now called each Sunday, the air, too long thick with expectation and threat, lifted. Yet the cost lingered amid the old photographs and dents in the kitchen wall. From the night the storm broke. Jebediah found, as many do in late age, that daily life is a kind of reckoning. His body ached with the weather. His dreams peopled less by Mildred and more by those clumsy, desperate intrusions. His cousin's face, slack with grief at the moment of surrender. The money was gone now, dispersed, unrecoupable. But something heavier had also lifted, the proving. The lonely hope that fortune would mend a loneliness that years had only deepened. He rose early still, bought his coffee with crumpled bills from a jar, played the same lottery numbers. Ritual, not expectation. When neighbors asked, "What's it like to have had it all and let it go?" he smiled gently, like someone tired of riddles. Sometimes, late at night, the phone rang. It was usually someone with a story of bad luck or illness, politely inquiring if the rumors of lingering millions were true. Jebediah always answered with patience, hung up with a blessing. The shelter for animals sent photos now and then. Puppies curled in sunlight, cats asleep on worn quilts. Thank you signs written in crooked children's script. Each picture, more than the oversized check or the applause, brought real happiness. He visited when he could. No media. Just an old man and a pocket of biscuits, sitting among tales and purrs, listening. Yet the world has a way of echoing unfinished business. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled softly and the windows streaked gray, Daniel parked suddenly outside the fence. He walked up to the porch, rainwater dripping from his jacket, holding a battered briefcase. Inside, Daniel stood at the kitchen counter, hands trembling. For a long while, only the whir of the fan and the patter of rain broke the silence. "Dad," Daniel said, finally, "I've made a mess of things." His eyes were rimmed red, and beneath the stubble and fatigue, all the boyish openness of his youth flickered, long buried but not gone. "I thought money would make things simple. I thought having it back, after losing everything 10 years ago, would fix what I messed up with you, with Mom, with Trudy." Jebediah settled across from him, elbows on familiar wood. "We all think that sometimes," he replied. "But money's just another set of numbers. Sometimes they add up neat, sometimes they break you." Daniel opened the briefcase. Inside were folders, receipts, a blank ledger. "Most of what you sent me is gone. Paid off the house, the medical bills, a year's tuition for Susie. But the rest," he shook his head. "I started drinking again, gambled some away. Tried to turn a quick profit and lost. I was too proud to ask for help." His breath caught, and he wiped his nose. "I'm not here for more, Dad. I just wanted to say thank you for bailing me out even when I didn't deserve it. And I'm sorry for the way I treated you after Mom died, for all the years silent." Jebediah's voice, when it came, was plain. "We've all run out of good luck, one time or another. The only thing keeps us is each other." For a moment, words failed them both. They sat together, listening to the rain and the hush that follows truth. Daniel, shoulders finally unburdened, put his hand across the table. Jebediah took it. Nothing was fixed. Debts lingered. Regrets would resurface. But in this quiet handshake was the beginning of repair. That summer, they met more often. Trudy drove in for Sunday dinners, sometimes bringing her youngest, who played quietly with a rescued mutt Jebediah had adopted. The stories around the table softened. Grudges faded. When the shelter held a Donors' Day, Daniel and Trudy attended, not as beneficiaries, but as workers, carrying kegs of water and cleaning cages under the Texas sun. Some cousins trickled apologies through letters or awkward phone calls. A few asked for more, but stopped when Jebediah patiently explained what little he kept went to the shelter, and the joy that brought him. Bitterness faded. The family found not peace exactly, but a kind of truce, an understanding that wealth had tested them and left behind what mattered most. The neighborhood, once wary, began to smile again as Jebediah strolled past with his new dog. Church invitations returned, less insistent on donation, more on companionship. At the market, folks greeted him not as the millionaire, but as old Mr. Clark, the man who listened, who remembered. Most evenings, Jebediah lingered on his porch, gazing at the quiet road, feeling the ache of loss and the subtler ache of forgiveness working through the knots of years. Sometimes, when he saw a family quarrel, a child in tears, thought of the cousin who broke into his home and wished him peace wherever he landed. The numbers were drawn each weekend. Jebediah marked his ticket, poured his coffee, and sat in the same kitchen chair. Hope was quieter now, but undiminished, a small ember, not a bonfire. He did not fear the dark. He had lived through the storm. What was left was his and could not be spent. By late autumn, the humidity of Texas had eased, and the world pressed forward, indifferent to fortune's former spark. Jebediah found routine again, walking his dog under burnt orange leaves, small talk with tellers at the bank, 3-week sermons at the church, the churring night songs of cicadas. Is home, stripped of relatives' noise and strangers' ambition, felt spacious. For the first time in years, he could hear himself think. He noticed how his neighbor's kindness returned, gradual but true. A hot dish left on his doorstep when a fever kept him in bed. Volunteers swinging by from the shelter to help repair his old fence. No one mentioned the money, nor fame, nor news vans that once clogged the curb. People saw him now as a man who endured, who still showed up each Sunday, who remembered children's names, who kept his smile gentle and unhurried. Still, signs of the past lingered, lock scars on the kitchen window, a few persistent letters filled with either longing or regret. Never malice now, only the shadow of hopes dashed. Jebediah kept these tucked away beside receipts for canned goods and hymn books. Testimony, perhaps, to the shape of a storm weathered and survived. On a long, dusky evening, as Thanksgiving approached, Daniel arrived bearing a pecan pie and an unexpected question. They sat in the lamplight, dog asleep at their feet. Daniel's voice was lower now, thoughtful, the anger and shame worn away. "Dad," he said, eyeing the pie but not eating, "when you first won, the night after, what did you want most?" Jebediah recalled the silence in his kitchen, the stunning sweep of possibility in his pulse, the gnawing awareness that love couldn't be bought, but maybe could be mended. He sipped cold tea. "I wanted to look someone in the eye and know I mattered. Not the money, not the numbers, me. Your mother always made me feel that way, regardless. But after she was gone, I hoped the family would remember me for more than what I could do for them." Daniel nodded, brow thoughtful, guilt subdued by honesty. "Did we disappoint you then?" Jebediah traced the cracked grain of the oak tabletop, words coming unhurried. "Life disappoints all of us. Then it teaches us to try again. You came back, son. The rest washed away with the summer storm." Daniel's relief was quiet, his gratitude wordless. They sat in companionable silence until the pie was gone. That year, as Christmas lights gleamed, some cousins phoned in, no longer for handouts, but with greetings. Cousin Trudy among them, her voice light and unburdened. Apologies and confessions turned into jokes and stories remembered from childhood gatherings. For the first time in decades, Jebediah felt the warmth of a family, no longer acting from need or fear, but from recognition of time lost, of lessons hard won. The animal shelter thrived. Jebediah was no longer their most important donor, simply their most loyal. He adopted an old, three-legged cat, bringing her home to share gentle quiet with his dog. Each visit to the shelter, children rushed to show him the new arrivals. Staff greeted him like kin. He invited Daniel and Trudy for one of the adoption events, and as they watched families choose their animals, hesitant, hopeful, hearts wide open, Jebediah's mouth corked into a smile neither bitter nor mournful, but whole. He realized, as the year slipped towards its close, that the fortune's true measure was in the unrest it stirred, and ultimately in the peace he stitched from its unraveling. One late January night, a knock at the back door fractured the quiet. Jebediah shuffled to answer, wary but unafraid. It was his estranged cousin, the one who'd broken in, driven by drink and despair all those months ago. The man's eyes were clearer now, his posture less caving. "I came to say thank you," the cousin whispered. "Not for the money, for not hating me after." Jebediah nodded, offering coffee and a seat. They spoke little. Pain had no need for words that night. Lessons bloom, grounding the heart. But the air between them shifted from condemnation to acceptance. The smallest seed of grace, planted deeper than suspicion ever reached. Spring advanced, inexorable and gentle. Jebediah walked with Daniel and Trudy at the park, listened to old Motown records by himself, and sometimes with his granddaughter, who, without prompting, began to call every Friday before supper. His days were measured in small blessings, not in outward displays or news headlines, but in the regular, reliable pulse of relationship, tended patiently, of wounds half healed, but no longer festering. The world, of course, did not change simply because Jebediah's luck had run its course. His lottery numbers came and went, never again matching the promise of that fateful April. Yet he played on, not out of hope for more, but to honor a dream that once carried a lonely man through decades of waiting. When someone asked, "Will you play forever, Mr. Clark?" he smiled. "I play because I can, and because every hope once spent turns into something better if you let it." And that answer, simple and soft-spoken, made the rounds of the church, the shelter, the porch stoops, an old man's wisdom handed down, gentler than cash, harder earned than luck. By early summer, the world bloomed with possibilities Jebediah once thought closed forever. The mornings were cool, the evenings gentle and gold. Jebediah found himself moving more slowly, but with a deeper sense of intention. Tasks that once seemed chores now became small rituals, refilling birdseed, trimming the rose bush, whittling a new cane on the porch. Each moment widened, unhurried by obligations to anyone but his own present. His house was plain again, content in its quiet. Daniel visited most Sundays, sometimes mowing the lawn, while Jebediah watched from the porch with his dog and cat by his side. Trudy pieced together old family recipes, bringing her children for dinners that grew raucous with laughter. The fractures and fissures that the winnings had drawn out didn't disappear, but they softened like stones worn by a gentle river. One morning, as the mailbox creaked open and he retrieved the day's meager deliveries, a grocery flyer, a thank you card from the shelter, a church bulletin, Jebediah paused. A single letter, unlike the others, rested at the bottom, addressed in careful, elegant cursive, with no return address. He opened it inside, sitting at the kitchen table. The letter said simply, "You weathered the storm. Some things can't be bought, nor stolen. Then. I wish you peace, and the kind of fortune no paper can deliver." Jebediah smiled, tears stinging behind his glasses. He carefully folded the letter and placed it with the others in his kitchen drawer. This one, he knew, he would keep always. Summer pressed on, slow and sweet. The shelter sent more photos. A dog adopted by a veteran, a trio of kittens carried home by a teacher with an open heart. Jebediah printed these out, pinning them above the sink. When folks stopped by, he would gesture to the collage and say, "That's worth more than gold, any day." He played his old numbers each Saturday. Sometimes he won enough for a cup of coffee, never more. Neighbors who once eyed him nervously now simply waved, no longer seeing the man who won, but simply Jeb, the steady presence on their block. He watched his granddaughter graduate from high school. Daniel and Trudy, after so many years of distance, stood side by side, joking about who she resembled. Trudy's youngest held the hand of Jebediah's old dog, who patiently suffered the child's enthusiastic hugs. That night, after the celebration, Daniel lingered to help Jebediah clean up the dishes. "You ever regret giving it away?" Daniel asked quietly, helping stack plates. Jebediah thought a long moment. He glanced at photographs on the mantel, the haphazard gifts left by friends, the latest letter from the shelter, and the cheerful jumble in his little kitchen. "I regret the years I thought money was the answer to loneliness," he replied. "But I don't regret what it taught me, or what it cost me to learn." Daniel nodded, his eyes lingering on his father with a kind of respect that needed no words. Autumn neared. Jebediah's health declined in small but unmistakable ways. Breath slower, steps shorter, hands occasionally trembling. Trudy began bringing casseroles. Daniel escorted him to doctor's visits. Even the cousins, far-flung but not estranged, sent postcards and called on birthdays. There was no talk of inheritance, only of stories, memories, and the mundane details of daily life. One early evening, as dusk colored the sky, Jebediah sat with his granddaughter on the porch. She watched, curious, as he scratched out numbers on his next lottery ticket. "Grandpa, if you won again, would you do it any different?" He considered, his smile slow and honest. "I'd still share it, honey. But I'd worry less about fixing the past. I'd spend more time listening, less time counting. She squeezed his hand. I think you're the luckiest person I know. Jebediah looked out over his yard, at the peace, the laughter, the ripple of conversations from inside. He saw the shadow of Mildred smiling from the window, felt the echo of regrets, and forgave them all. The fortune had come and gone, but left behind its gentlest blessing, the quiet, stubborn love of family, the loyalty of friends earned by kindness and time, the first sweet note sung by birds at dawn. When the numbers drew that next Saturday, Jebediah didn't check them until the morning. He smiled, shaking his head at the results. He'd lost again, but it didn't feel like losing at all. He tucked the ticket in the old jar beside his bed, gave his dog a biscuit, and turned the porch light off one last time before sleep. The world spun onward. Some things, worth, forgiveness, and hope, stayed, no matter the numbers.